You boys be quiet down there!
The MSX was always a cool little PC from the 80s. The system outputs standard video that will work on any old TV, and games play from cartridges, just like consoles around that time, so it feels almost like a game console, with a keyboard attached, though some games play from floppy disks or cassettes. Konami was a very active third-party developer for the MSX, porting over many of their popular arcade and Famicom titles. And Akumajo Dracula, the game you probably know as Castlevania, was no exception, receiving its own unique version for the MSX2 in October 1986, just 1 month after the original Famicom disc version was released. This special MSX version of the first Castlevania also came to parts of Europe under the title Vampire Killer. I've always been curious how this one compares to the other games in the series, but every time I've attempted to play it in the past, I couldn't get very far due to its difficulty and cryptic nature. So in this video, I'm going to see if I can power through in order to take a closer look at this lesser-known version of the original 8-bit Castlevania. How different is it from the more well-known Famicom and NES version? What kinds of weird secrets does it hold?
Don't sing if you want to live long. They have no use for your song. You're dead and out of this world.
The lead designer of Castlevania for MSX was Akihiko Nagata, who worked on Nemesis 2 for MSX, Ajax on the X68000, and a handful of PC Engine titles, before moving on to management at Konami in the early 2000s, where he's credited on several DDR games. The creator and director of the original NES Castlevania, Hitoshi Akamatsu, is not credited here on the MSX version, but obviously he can be considered responsible for much of the content here, since the majority of the graphics and stage design in the MSX are based on that original work. The soundtrack in the MSX game uses the same compositions as the NES one, so it was written by Kinuyo Yamashita and Satoe Terashima. Terashima worked on many other early Konami games like the Goonies games and Life Force. Yamashita has had a long and distinguished career in game music, working on Konami's King Kong 2 before Power Blade and Pocky and Rocky 2 for Natsume, among many others. Hideaki Shikama is credited with programming the soundtrack for the MSX version, and he worked on many other early PC and arcade games from Konami. So here we have the game packaging. MSX games came in all different sized boxes, but Konami's MSX2 games came in these decent sized plastic cases. Here on the back, you can see a large screenshot from the end of the game prominently displayed. So they must have been proud of this big Dracula portrait in the background. This case still has its original Konami sticker seal intact. Inside we have a not quite black and white, but black and blue ink manual on blue paper. Most of the instructions consist of the item and enemy descriptions. Here we have the cart itself. And this little card here is a scratch and win game. Apparently the cards only came with some MSX games. You would scratch off the boxes to see how many apples you got. The apples could be redeemed for Konami goods, like this jacket or a fanny pack. You usually needed to buy more than one game to win anything. However, there was also an instant jackpot that allowed you to choose from one item from the available goods. The MSX Akumajo Dracula is decidedly from a different era. This isn't something you turn on at the end of a long day and slink back in your easy chair to relieve stress. This game was designed to make you feel pain. The fun comes from conquering what might at first seem like insurmountable challenges, and the bragging rights that come with that. The term Nintendo hard comes to mind, except some might consider this game even harder than the NES version. Hopefully your favorite part of the NES Castlevania was trying to survive with the leather whip, the default and weakest main weapon, because that's how you're going to spend most of your time in the MSX version, unless you've mastered the game. The enemies take tons of hits this way, and it's a good thing getting hit takes less of your life bar in this one, because the enemy behavior and hit detection is, well, let's just say it seems you're meant to take a lot more hits in this version. I always think of the original Castlevania as having 6 stages, but it's actually 18. The 6, let's call them levels, are divided into sections or blocks separated by doors, which the game calls stages. The NES and MSX games both have a total of 18 stages each. I'll be using the term levels throughout the video for the 6 separate parts of the game, each with a boss at the end. I may refer to the 18 stages as blocks or sections. Probably the most difficult aspect of this game, and greatest barrier to enjoying it, is that unlike the NES game, there are no continues. That's right, exhaust your stock of 3 lives anywhere in this game, and there's no continue option. It's back to the title screen, and starting from the beginning of the game. There is, however, a solution to this. Cue the Konami Game Master cart. By inserting this cart into the second cartridge slot on your MSX, you can unlock cheats in all kinds of Konami games. And fortunately, in the case of Vampire Killer, you can use it to unlock a stage select and continue feature, in addition to choosing your number of lives. If you want a chance to practice farther into this game without first mastering it, what you've got to do is get yourself one of these Game Master carts. Ironically, the MSX game could really use a save screen like this one in the Famicom disc version. The MSX is the one that's a PC, so you'd think that would be the one that's on a disc, and considering the difficulty, needs a save feature more than the Famicom game. But as you improve at this game, saving will become perhaps less important. After all, sometimes in the MSX game you'll resume from a checkpoint and wish you could go back further in the level to collect necessary items. It would be better if this continue screen afforded by the Game Master cart worked more like the NES continue feature and brought you back to the beginning of the level rather than the last checkpoint or stage. Nothing is perfect. At least with the Game Master cart, you can reset and use the stage select anytime. So let's hit the spacebar and start the game. Okay, this looks familiar enough to NES Castlevania veterans, but right off the bat, the first thing you'll notice is there's no scrolling. Most action games on MSX go screen by screen, without any scrolling. This is due to the lack of hardware scrolling on the MSX. Even Contra on the MSX, a run and gun, is lacking scrolling, and limits you to one screen at a time. This doesn't necessarily hurt the gameplay here in Castlevania though. In fact, you may see as we progress through the game that screen by screen actually kind of suits the altered gameplay here in the MSX version. Maybe this is where Konami originally got the idea to retell the same Castlevania stories so many times. It's the same story, but a different adventure. What the hell? Jumping past the door to reveal the secret cash and prizes seems like a really well-known trick in the NES version. Why can't I do it here? Are they just messing with us, subverting expectations? What a bunch of bullcrap. The first and probably biggest gameplay difference is the need to collect keys in order to open the door to the next section. Unlike in the NES version, if you get to the door and you don't have the key, you won't be able to progress. While we're on the topic, don't let these slightly smaller yellow keys fool you. These are used for opening the treasure chests found throughout the game. The keys needed to open the door are these big white keys, and there is usually only one of them to be found in each section or stage. The first key is found right here in this wall. In fact, most of the door keys in the game are hidden in walls. Unfortunately, there's no wall meat to be found in this game, but you'll find lots of other things, including merchants, hidden in the walls. Hey, what are you doing in here? And in case you don't like what the merchant is offering, the game apparently lets you murder them, sometimes even awarding bonuses for doing so. Another distinguishing feature is the amount of items that can be collected in this game, lending a more RPG-like quality that helped influence the design of Castlevania 2 on the NES. There are many status items and weapons to familiarize yourself with. For example, in this game Simon can even hold a shield to block projectiles. While the Simon character holding a shield looks convincing enough, it just looks so wrong to those of us who grew up with the NES version. I mean, have you ever seen anything that looks so fitting and natural, like it was there all the time, yet so oddly unfamiliar? Take it away! The visual dissonance hurts my eyes! At first, something like hiding slime enemies in the candlesticks might seem particularly hateful, until you figure out that this game is all about memorizing where the desirable items are located, and that means keeping track of the items you don't want to get to. Unlike in the NES game, where the doors slam open and shut, these doors raise up and make a ridiculous sound, as if electrified. It almost reminds me of these mechanical doors in Castlevania Bloodlines. You go down in the flooded basement, like in the NES version, and the second key is hidden right here. The rendition of the original Castlevania theme, titled Vampire Killer, should sound familiar enough here. The MSX2 has 3 square wave channels, provided by its YM2149 sound chip, providing a similar sound to the square waves of the Sega Master System, although the square wave PSG sound of the MSX sounds decidedly less smooth and more staccato by comparison. I think this game sounds quite like what a Master System Castlevania could have sounded like, although the percussion here is not the usual clicks and clacks of the Master System's noise channel. The bassy sound of the NES's triangle wave is missed here. The soundtrack of the MSX version having a less full sound. For the most part though, the MSX soundtrack is very similar and faithful to the NES version. There isn't much to talk about in terms of the music composition, because if you're familiar with the NES version, you get the same great songs here. Whenever we make a Castlevania video, I like to take a moment to mention which tracks from the game were featured in the Dracula Battle CDs, since the Basement Brothers always used to listen to these 2 epic discs on a loop in the car back in the day. And in this case, the soundtrack is for the most part the same as the NES game. So that would make track 7 from disc 1, Vampire Killer, the only song that applies to the MSX version, since that's the only track featured from the original Akumajo Dracula game. You could spend more time here collecting items, but it's only the first stage. Let's just get this over with. You can't bring any weapons with you to the next stage anyway. You're probably accustomed to using the axe sub-weapon to take down this familiar boss, but the axe from the NES game is nowhere to be found in this version. So as long as you grab the chain whip, you can take the first stage boss down by just whipping away furiously when it flies low enough. What's happening? Get the hell down here! What fun is it if you can't jump and pose your character when collecting this ball at the end of the stage? Something's missing here. You'll notice that the map screen from the NES game is missing between stages. The most likely reason they took it out is the MSX's inability to smoothly scroll the image like in the NES. As a kid, I always wondered what secrets lay locked away at the top of that tower. It must be lonely being Dracula all alone up there. I wonder what he does all the time.
Like the candles on the shelf. When I'm alone, I myself.
Wow, these knights here in level 2 are flying in this version. On the NES, they were far more dignified, walking slowly, deliberately, menacingly. At this speed on the MSX, they just look silly. The hit detection in general is just worse than in the NES game, and one mistake can lead to multiple hits from these fast-moving enemies. We also get our first encounter here with the Medusa heads in this game. This enemy is already infamously annoying on the NES, but once again they've taken the level of annoyance and amped it way up. It's much harder to hit them here. Speaking of the hit detection, did I mention it's a lot harder to whip the candlesticks in this one? The timing has got to be just right. The first key of the second level is located right up here at the beginning, but how do we get up here? Whereas falling off the bottom of the screen would invariably lead to death in the NES game, in the MSX version you can fall down to other areas, and you have to know where to fall to end up where you want to land in a lower area. There are a few places in the game, however, where falling will kill you. The developers must have really hated the player. Crossing this part is particularly challenging, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is where a lot of players, the ones who are persistent enough to even get this far into the second level, got stuck. The trick is to just keep walking when you enter this screen, and jump at the correct 2 moments. Leave these candlesticks alone, because they're just slimes. Here you have to dig through a large destructible section of the floor while avoiding the slimes hiding inside to get the final key of this level. The section with the spikes coming down should look familiar. Next is the boss, Medusa, which is quite a bit easier than in the NES version. Here it doesn't matter a whole lot which sub-weapon you have. She doesn't move fast, and continually whipping works fine, but if you can buy the dagger here just before the boss, that's the best way. Just don't accidentally grab the whip again here. The music here in level 3 is missing this intro from the NES version. Instead, it jumps straight to this part. Which reminded me of the newer arrangement found in the X68000 game, which has its own intro. The first key is off to the right over here, so don't forget to grab it. If only the hit detection worked better. The next key is up on this platform, taunting us right in front of the door. So how the heck do we get it? Here's where the designers decided to really start messing with us in this mind-bending MSX version. The solution is to fall down from the area of the level you're in, and of course it loops back to the door. Right, makes perfect sense. I guess this castle is enchanted as hell or something. Then, after picking up the key, to be able to reach the door, you need to once again fall down, and then jump from here. I wonder what fresh hell awaits us on the other side. There's not much to the mummy boss here. You can just kneel in the corner where you start. As with everything in the game, have the dagger if you can, but otherwise grab the holy water just before the boss. You don't hold up and press attack to use sub-weapons in this game like you'd expect. Instead, there are different button combinations for every sub-weapon. This is probably because in this version, you can hold more than one weapon at a time. For example, to throw the holy water, you need to first jump, and then tap forward while in mid-air. It's very strange, and I often do it by accident while simply trying to move around. The NES version let us know that Simon falls, and finds himself in the catacombs beneath the castle. Here in the MSX version, we get no such scene. Once again, I'll blame the lack of scrolling for this omission. Walk left here at the beginning of the stage to grab this key. You'll need it to get the whip here. You'll also notice the key to open the first door is right here at the beginning, but we can't reach it yet. This upper section here is basically just a loot room to grab some extra hearts, which are both your currency for the merchants and your sub-weapon power in this game. Riding these platforms and ducking under the ceiling should be familiar enough to fans of the NES game. These stairs lead to the ending of this first section. Don't forget to stop by the next screen to grab that key we saw earlier before heading up. I like how when you kill this merchant, it looks like the skeleton is what's left of her, but it's really just part of the background. The music changes back to the level 2 theme for this section, just like in the NES game. My strategy for this section is to make sure I grab this cane first, which works just like the treasure chest keys, except it picks locks, allowing you to open several treasure chests instead of just one. Then get the axe, which you'll want to hold on to for the boss. The axe in this game operates more like a boomerang. It replaces your whip, and you have to catch it every time it comes back, or else you'll default back to the leather whip, and you'll be screwed. It doesn't help that there seems to be a glitch, where if you throw holy water before heading off screen, the game counts that as losing the axe. More than once I've launched the holy water by accident by simply pressing a direction while in air, and lost the axe I was saving for the boss. After getting the axe, I try to get through this section as quickly as possible so I can keep most of my life bar. So, if you've ever played the NES game and wondered what's behind these little openings in the background, well, wonder no more, because the MSX version has answers. I have to wonder whether this was just background decoration in the NES game that the MSX team decided they could make use of, or if there was some coordination between the Famicom and MSX teams, where these portals from the MSX game still appear in the background on the Famicom, and I would guess it's the former. So, in case the MSX version wasn't already bullshit enough up to this point with its insane difficulty, physics bending, weird controls, and bad hit detection, now we've got a maze to get through. This section isn't very large, consisting of 3 different repeating areas connected by warp doors, but it's very easy to make yourself crazy, getting lost anyway, so it's a good idea to pull up a YouTube video or walkthrough here for the quickest path through. There are some good areas for mining hearts here. You'll need them for the next stage. Oh great, I died into the door again. If this happens at a checkpoint, it won't count, by the way. I actually don't want to go back to the beginning of this section, because I need the axe to use against the boss. Well, this is what that Game Master card is for. I can use the stage select to go back to the stage before this and get the axe again, so I can try to carry it to the boss this time. The fight against Frankenstein's monster here is familiar. The axe is good to have, and the holy water is especially effective, if you can time it right. However, you don't want to use too much holy water, as you'll need at least 50 hearts left over for the next level. Level 5, now we're getting somewhere. So remember how I said the continue feature becomes less important as you learn to play? And since you lose your hearts anytime you die in this game, you're probably wondering why I'm talking about saving hearts from the previous level. Well, here's the thing. The trick to MSX Castlevania is basically the same trick for ghouls and ghosts that I shared way back in my Magician Lord video. Try to get the dagger. The dagger that you're going to need is for sale right here in the wall at the beginning of level 5. There's no way to have enough saved unless you've survived from the previous level. Like the axe, the dagger replaces your whip and is unlimited. Using it doesn't consume hearts. Once you get the dagger, and if you've practiced this level enough with the whip, you're basically on easy street for the rest of level 5. Make sure you grab this red ball here. It replenishes some life, and these skeletons near the beginning of the stage are pretty difficult to get through without taking some hits. In the next section, make sure you don't grab the whip right here if you already have the dagger. These, I guess, Dracula portraits are an interesting upgrade from the NES version. In the same section of the NES version, there are what appear to be empty picture frames in the background. Almost as if they wanted to put pictures in the background here, but hardware limitations didn't allow for it on the NES/Famicom. Some of these portraits have beards and some don't. Ooh, spooky. So the way to get the key here involves another crazy leap of faith, jumping from right here near the end of the stage actually. After you get it, just head back up and finish the level. The Grim Reaper here follows a much simpler pattern than the one in the NES game, bouncing off the walls blindly like a DVD screensaver, keeping things predictable. Predictably annoying.
There's this cube on the screen, and it bounces around all day, and sometimes it looks like it's heading right into the corner of the screen, and then at the last minute it hits a wall and bounces away.
But where's Waldo?
It would seem that hardware may have limited the complexity of this boss's attack pattern in this version, so again, it's very interesting to see how the two versions of the game play to the different strengths of the hardware. If you're still holding on to that dagger, you're going to have a pretty easy time here. In the NES version and X68000 remake, it's great to have the boomerang, but that's not the case here. The dagger is the only easy fix on the MSX. We've made it to the final level of the game. Like in the NES, you want to do your best to just pass by these large bats. The first 2 stages of the final level each contain multiple keys, but you really don't need to bother with them since there's a key right here at the end by the door. We weren't allowed to bring our dagger from level 5 with us to level 6, but the key to success here is the same as it was in the previous level. Try to get the dagger again. To do that though, the key is to grab this white book here at the beginning of the second section. The white books increase your intelligence, allowing you to barter with the merchants for lower prices. The black books, conversely, decrease your intelligence and make the prices higher. You need to grab the white book here to ensure a reasonable price with the merchant ahead who's selling the dagger, and then make sure you don't grab this black book right above this. Just like in the NES version, these clock tower gears in the background don't move on the MSX. It's too bad they don't actually animate, because according to NES producer Hitoshi Akamatsu, the gears represent Dracula's heart. They only turn as long as Dracula's alive. That's why at the end of the NES game, only the clock tower collapses. The Stage 4 music makes a brief comeback here for the final section of the game, which kind of makes sense, since that song was only used for part of a level before this point. Unlike in the NES version, where this staircase with the moon tells you you've finally reached Dracula, you still actually have one section of the level left to complete in the MSX version. Quick trivia, the reason you can continue from this spot in the NES game is probably because the final section with Dracula gets loaded in separately from the rest of the level in the original Famicom disc version. You can even save right before Dracula on the Famicom disc. Seriously, doesn't it get boring up there? I assume he sometimes has to leave to feed at night.
7 beds!
They ever shown him doing somebody in and then feeding on him?
You're asking if they've ever done a Sesame Street in which the Count kills somebody and then sucks their blood for sustenance?
Yeah.
No, they've never done that.
So we finally made it, and that foreboding Dracula music kicks in here when we reach his chamber. The first phase of the boss should be familiar enough. When you defeat him, he turns into a bunch of red blobs that scatter, foreshadowing Dracula's resurrection. It's no big surprise that they didn't attempt this large second phase boss from the NES game. The MSX hardware probably wasn't capable of it, so they went with a portrait on the wall that comes to life and spews out bats instead. But the fact that they spent enough memory to draw such a large background feature is impressive enough in its own right. Impressive enough to highlight on the back of the box, I suppose. The second phase boss music is the same as the NES game though. According to Castlevania creator Hitoshi Akamatsu, the second phase of the boss in the original NES game is not Dracula transformed into a monster. No, Dracula is gone. That is a monster born from the curse of man. I wonder if this big Dracula portrait in the MSX one is actually Dracula, or if it is also just possessed by the curse of man. As long as you have the dagger, this part should be no problem, as long as you climb up and position yourself here. I'm unaware of a viable way to defeat this boss without the dagger, or at least the crucifix, which is weaker than the axe, but has a longer range. This ending story is in English, even in the Japanese version of the game. Simon isn't named, and it explains that Dracula is not dead, just put into a deep sleep. How convenient. We don't get the joke credits, like in the Famicom and NES version. Instead, the actual credits are shown. We also don't get the nice ending graphics from the NES, only this boring black background. Although the MSX game seems to make use of the same soundtrack as the Famicom NES game every step of the way, for some reason the one place where it deviates is the ending credits theme. We get different ending music here. The ending music from the NES isn't a masterpiece or anything. but I prefer it, and it fits the game better than this campy song found only here in the MSX game. And just like in many other Konami games, the game loops and starts again from the beginning. I didn't find this second loop of the game more difficult than the first, but the stage number keeps increasing. The Game Master Kart stage select only allows you to select as high as stage 18. It won't let you start from the second loop at all, which makes me wonder if the second loop is any different from the first. Also, before we go, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention there's a fan hack out there for this game, created by FRS. The hack includes several quality of life improvements like Genesis 3-button controller support and compatibility fixes. Most notably, it adds support for SCC Music, which was Konami's latest and greatest sound chip used in their newer cartridge releases. The upgraded soundtrack in this hack makes it definitely worth checking out. And that's Castlevania, Akumajo Dracula, or I suppose Vampire Killer, on the MSX. This alternate 8-bit version of the original Castlevania does seem to have its fans among those who grew up with it. If you're approaching it for the first time today, however, expect to find a steep learning curve. This game certainly doesn't pull its punches, save for the generous life bar, and you'll find the other classic Castlevania games of the 8-bit and 16-bit eras much more approachable. If you're expecting a casual playthrough of the MSX version, you'll instead be met with a very frustrating experience. I'm not sure if I can recommend the MSX version for first-timers in 2023, but if you're patient, your persistence will be rewarded. At any rate, there are plenty of quirks to be found here which influenced the NES sequel, making the game certainly at least worth a look today. Thank you for watching this MSX review on Basement Brothers. If you love Japanese gaming hardware from the 80s and 90s like we do, then you'll definitely want to check out our other content. Please remember to like, subscribe, and let your friends know about our channel if they're also into classic gaming. We'll be back with another video soon, so see you then.